I've never worked for anyone in my life.
Hello Mentor is brought to you by Hiredly, your go-to job platform to find a career where you can work, grow, and belong. Explore companies today at www.hiredly.com. Your dream job might just be one click away.
Hello and welcome to Hello Mentor Season 2, Episode 7. I'm Shakira and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today we have a very special guest with us, the one and only Deborah Henry. Thanks for being here today. Deborah is the founder of Fugee and also the winner of Miss Universe Malaysia 2011. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
How was your journey here? I hope it was comfortable and not too long in traffic.
No, it was an easy 10 minutes from home.
Oh,
but when you step out into that heat, it's like it sizzles.
Nice and air conditioning here, so I hope that you're comfortable here with us today. I'm really, really grateful that you decided to join us today. Today's topic is on the way to changing the world one step at a time. And we've got a bunch of questions lined up. We've got our listeners who are eager to learn. Over here at Hiredly, we're all about growing. We want to help all of our job seekers and all of our users to actually level up. So yeah, I hope that they, get lots of great information today. So are you ready to just jump in with the questions?
Absolutely.
All right. So to start things off, can you tell us a little bit about Fugee?
Yeah, sure. So I didn't start Fuji organization with a big plan. There was no 5-year plan, when we were all about that. It was actually born out of a very, very simple premise. I was actually in my early 20s. Mm-hmm. I had always liked, for some reason, since my teenage years, been very passionate about human rights, about development, about basically asking my granddad this question of why are there people that can't even go to school and have the most basic things? And maybe I was 15 and very naive, but it really was an area that moved me. And fast forward many years, went to university. So I studied political science and economics. So I came out of university armed with a degree, but also even more convinced that I wanted to do something in this space. I wasn't sure what it was. Was it a non-profit? Was it working for the UN or a big organization, work for government? But I knew I wanted to somehow make a change in that way, right? So came back to Malaysia, ended up in a beauty pageant, as you do. Not really. I was never really into beauty pageants, but somehow I started modeling very young, so it was like a natural step as well. But it ended up being a great platform. It offered me a great step to further a lot of the things that I wanted to do. So a great stepping stone. And then I got actually, that was when I first met a refugee family. It was an interview I did for UNHCR Malaysia. It was in 2018. And I visited a couple of different refugee families, one of which was a Somali family. And they lived in Gombak. They had just come to Malaysia with their grandmother, 4 siblings. And I still very distinctly remember leaving their home that day, thinking to myself, I can't walk away from this. I can't just give them $50 and say, live a good life in my country, although you can't go to school, you can't access any services, and walk away. And that was that moment for me where I didn't know what I wanted to do till then. And in 2008, we set up 2008, we set up a tuition. We just did very simple tuition for 6 months. And the following year, 2009, we set up a very informal learning center.
Wow.
So that was sort of the birth of the organization. It started off with a school, primary education. And then fast forward, 6 years, we expanded into kindergarten, secondary education. And it essentially is ensuring that no child is left out of an education, and in Malaysia that children who don't have the right documentation to enter national schools have nowhere else to go. Yeah. So a school like Fuji basically is a lifeline for so many children who wouldn't be able to go elsewhere. And so now the organization has pretty much expanded, and we do a bunch of other things, but all within the education space.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. It's really inspirational. How has your mixed heritage influenced your perspective and your approach to human rights and sustainable development?
So I mean, I'm not sure whether it's in terms of human rights and sustainable development, because I think that there's a lot more that goes into influencing someone's perspective. But I think my mixed heritage has definitely made me who I am today in more ways than one. My dad's Malaysian, my mother's Irish. We pretty much grew up in Malaysia, so this is very much home culturally, from community-wise. But it's funny in a way, because I reflect on this often. You sometimes don't necessarily feel that you fully fit in anywhere. And I think it's taken me a long time to come to terms with being okay with that if I go back to Ireland, to Dublin, I'm Irish, like I was born there, my mum's Irish, I've Irish family, but not, I mean, a lot of me isn't Irish. And then in Malaysia, I'm very much Malaysian, represented my country. You know, my heart beats for this country and so much of what I do. But I'm not 100% here either. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I feel like mixies or mixed kids like us, sometimes you just feel that, you know, and I think more and more, as cliche as it sounds, I'm like, I'm a citizen of the world. You know, I feel that we have, and maybe a lot of people who have that similar upbringing, they can really fit in so many different cultures and societies. And I think that's a massive advantage, being able to really, well, firstly, I can look like I belong in many places. So I think that's cool. But growing up in terms of a value system, I think you kind of take best of both worlds. You see perhaps from my mother's side, a little bit more liberal, and you know, different priorities. And then my Asian side, with my dad, a little bit more conservative, a very strong family values, different priorities as well. And so when it was kind of bridging those two worlds together. And so you can actually have a very beautiful mix of, best of both worlds, but also I think a very deep understanding of what's different. And especially in a world today, when you talk about human rights, when you talk about sustainable development or community building, if you look around you, not just in Malaysia, but everywhere, you see this divisiveness. You see a lot of othering where you don't look like me, you're different, I don't like you, in simplistic terms. And even in our own home here, right? You know, Malaysia is a country that's built off the backs of immigrants, of migrants, and we are very mixed today as a society. But do we really fully not just accept it, but really celebrate it in every sense of the word? And I think when growing up very mixed, you have a very natural, like, you just ebb and flow. You have a very natural understanding, appreciation. And that's like asking me to choose a side. I was like, my dad's side, my mom's side, which side do I choose, you know?
Can't choose both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And why? No, the question is, why do I need to choose?
True.
Like, why should I have to choose anything? I am what I am. And moving away from ticking a box, you know? You don't need to fit into like a construct that someone has made. And I think more young people asking themselves that question. And I think it starts with that embracing and being who you are as yourself without having to, which part of society do I fit in?
Yeah.
And it's also another thing I talk about is travel, right? Being because I had the privilege of spending a lot of time outside of Malaysia. And you when you live in different societies and you experience them, you accept it and you understand it and you observe it. And with that comes a degree of respect, less judgment. You understand that people are different, so.
Yeah, I love that. I love being able, like, when you're a mixed kid, you're able to see the difference in cultures and understand it in a way that people who are not mixed might not have access to. Yeah. So it kind of opens your mind and your eyes a little bit.
I always say this to people: try and be a minority somewhere. Yeah. You know, when you're used to being the majority in any situation, not just culturally or ethnically. Even in a job situation, you don't see it from a different perspective. So try and be a minority in any situation, and it gives you a very different experience of life.
Right. So what were some of your biggest challenges that you faced when you first started Fuji, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I have a long list, and I still face many of them today. What are they? I think, well, firstly, you can't talk about. So what we essentially do is we provide education services for predominantly the refugee community in Malaysia. There are close to 200,000 refugees, and a refugee is a person that has to flee their home because of war, conflict, persecution. So often it's a life or death situation, and that's why they flee, and that's why we have refugees in Malaysia. So it's very much on humanitarian grounds. The second reality in Malaysia is that our government and our country, we don't officially recognize refugees. So therefore, they are considered illegal in this country, if you look at like law. And because of that, they don't get access to basic services. So access to healthcare is very, very limited. Access to education formal education is denied. They are denied the right to work legally. So you have a group of people in Malaysia that are we don't really want them to be here, but they are, and we don't really allow them to do anything, but they somehow have to survive. And we're a non-profit organization trying to help in this situation. So a lot of limitations. The firstly is that we run fully on donations, fundraising, public funds. How do you successfully fundraise in a climate that is very hostile towards the work that you do? You have to make a lot of friends. You have to find those friends, make those friends, and then you need to be able to get them to see the value of the work that you're doing. But you're swimming against the tide a lot of the time. So it's very emotionally and just physically exhausting a lot of the time. And bear in mind, our organization now is 16 years old. So that's pretty much been what it's been. The second is that it's not sustainable. I can't pay for someone else's life. I can't pay for them to exist. So if I'm paying for your child to go to school, if I'm paying your medical bills, if I'm paying when you can't pay your rent, if I'm paying when you lose your job, I'm not a government. I can't be fundraising to support the lives of hundreds of people in the community. So it's not a long-term situation. It's a short-term thing. If it continues more than 16 years, it becomes difficult for me to keep going and saying, hey guys, give me more money. Yeah.
When you started, how many of you started Fuji together, and now how big is your team?
So it was my university friend and myself, Shikin. We both started doing the tuition. So she did math, I did English. And we did that for 6 months. And then when we started the school in 2009, we had 60 students and probably like 5 teachers. And fast forward to today, we have over 20, I think about 25 staff, employees. And we've probably educated close to, maybe like 1,000 children.
Oh,
and so
from kindergarten all the way to secondary school.
Yeah,
right?
So now we run pretty much kindy, primary, secondary school, and that's under Fugee School. And we have 200 students, and we run youth programs. So we have a university scholarship program. So any deserving refugee youth who gets into a university, we will cover their scholarship. And we run a lot of other youth support programs as well. And yeah.
All right. It's impressive that you and your team also managed to keep the school open during lockdown. So how did you do this, and what impact did the lockdowns have on the school?
Yeah, so COVID was extremely hard. A lot of the funds that we got from within Malaysia completely dried up because, companies didn't have the money. And then we also, if you remember, we had the white flag movement here. We had a lot of local communities that were in need. So a lot of money was diverted to Malaysians. And and then we reached a point where we were paying our monthly bill overheads month to month at one point. That's how desperate we got as an organization.
Yeah, but how did you get past that?
We need to ask God that. I mean, I was just like, how did we?
Sheer determination.
I think I resorted to one time. And I think this is like the first time I've ever done this in all these years. I literally just pulled out my phone one day, went onto Instagram and literally put out an appeal and said, we're really in a bad situation. We need to raise funds to keep the school open. So please donate. I think I did that at one point, and people were great. They donated a huge amount of money for us.
Wow.
And we just tried a lot of different approaches. We ended up doing a lot of food aid. So a lot of people sending us money to disperse to the community. So at one point, when this is not something we do, like when we're not a relief agency in this way, but I think we fed thousands of people. And it was everybody, Malaysians, migrant workers, refugees, stateless, you name it, whoever. We didn't ask questions. So we ended up doing a lot of that in the first year as well. But we stayed open somehow because we got in touch with the right people. Money kept coming in, even if it was month to month.
Yeah.
It was the first time ever that I had to cut wages, I think by about 20%, but we paid it all back.
Right.
After COVID, especially because we cut wages from people that were already living on the edge. A lot of our refugee teachers and individuals that aren't very well off. So we did commit ourselves to pay them back when we could. So we did that. We kept the school open. It was actually a massive boost for us in the right direction. We became a lot more tech savvy. We digitalized the school. So all the teachers had to learn how to use Google Classroom and a whole bunch of different apps. And, learning was very hard, no doubt. Can't deny that. But we kept the school open. We still kept kids attending classes. I think we had a very high retention rate coming back to school, so our numbers didn't drop, which is really important in education because if you see like our national system, a lot of kids actually never went back to school. And I think it just gave us a further resilience to go, you know what, we've got this. If we could survive that, then we need to now dream big, and we need to think about bigger, better solutions that we can come up with to solve education access in Malaysia.
What are some of the most rewarding outcomes that you've witnessed in this period of working with refugees?
Rewarding outcomes. I think it's given me, on a very personal level, it's given me so much resilience in so many different ways. I mean, we all go through tough stuff, and to kind of observe a community that despite the daily challenges, despite not even lacking the certainty of where you're going to be tomorrow, that you could be detained and arrested today, that you yourselves don't have jobs, and to see that resilience, to see how adaptable they are, to see how they keep living, they keep fighting to build a good life. I think that always gives me it just makes me so deeply grateful for then everything, my life, everything around me, and it gives me that motivation to keep going.
Is there any success story that you remember from the top of your head of any of your students who, came out of their struggle with some success, and this success story has reaffirmed your mission?
Oh gosh, so many. I mean, each student has their own story. Everyone's going through their own challenges, and for some kids it's finishing school, just getting your cert that says you've graduated. For some kids it's, I want to become an engineer, I'm going to fight my way into university. For some kids it's, I want to start a family. It's very normal, natural dreams and goals, right? But for them to kind of have a dream, have a goal, is already such a big thing, and for them to be able to achieve it. I did this activity with the students once, many years ago, before like iPads, I think. And I gave them pieces of paper and coloring pencils and crayons. And I said, draw your like dream home and your favorite food or your hobby. And after an hour, those pages were blank, which was weird because I sat there and I was like, I was young. This is in my early 20s. I'm like, what's wrong? Come on, you can just scribble something. And they were alive. These refugee children were in Malaysia. They were safe, but their imaginations were dead. And think about it. Like if you think about how would you live your life if you couldn't dream? Like if you couldn't dream about a future, about possibilities, as impossible as they may seem, how do you wake up the next day and have hope? Like I can't wrap my head around that.
Was it like empty paper because they just literally could not, they don't know what they are capable of. They don't know what to dream for.
Yeah, they were. I mean, they were young. They were probably like 8, 9. But I think they'd gone through war. A lot of them had gone through trauma, and they just didn't have. They didn't have peaceful homes where you could cultivate this. With parents were in the right mental state to cultivate this. So the kids were just like traumatized, and you don't have the opportunity. And when you go through traumatic situations, this is very natural, right? So yeah, we had to cultivate that. So a huge part of what we've done is encouraging people to dream. Like, you have the right to dream big, and we will support you achieve those dreams. And so that in itself, when you ask like the stories, it's cultivating that. If you can get people to imagine, that's already a big win.
Yeah.
And then the second stage is, okay, now that you can think about all these things, take advantage of the support. We're here to support you. How do you make it work? How do you build your resilience, grit, determination, discipline, fight, work hard to now be successful, right? So these things come together. But we've had scholars who've gone through our degree program. We had a couple that, one guy got into Colombia in the US, and we managed to sponsor his education in Colombia. Coincidentally, he's from Afghanistan. He got resettled with his family last year. So how amazing that they all moved to the US and he gets into Colombia.
That is amazing.
Like, even us normal kids, don't get into Colombia. So he worked, smart kid, worked hard, driven, applied, got a part scholarship, and then we paid for the rest. So these are huge. There's some of them are just huge inspirations for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about Fugee, which is different from Fugee School. My understanding is that Fugee is a mission-driven social enterprise. So how did that come about, and what has been its impact on Fugee School?
Yeah, so Fugee is a social enterprise that I set up about 6-7 years ago, and it was I guess the crux of it was that we wanted a sustainable source of income for the organization, for the nonprofit, and we thought like, okay, we could set up a jewelry business and channel a percentage of the profits. So it worked, and we managed to do that, and I think it served a purpose. However, we needed to kind of make a decision, and so being in the jewelry space, it's hugely competitive. It's fashion, right? So you next. And I think we had to make a decision. So end of last year, we actually made a pretty hard decision that we're going to keep Fugee as a brand, as a sort of the enterprise wing of the organization, but we're going to shift away from jewelry. So we're just kind of wrapping up in terms of wrapping up the jewelry collection right now. But
what are you moving towards?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure yet, and I don't want to rush it.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of hibernating the brand for now, and I'll sort of rethink in time to come. But yeah, it was a hard decision, but I think it was necessary in that you have only 24 hours in a day, limited amount of brain power, resources, and ultimately it came down to if our impact with the amount of money and time we're spending trying to sell jewelry to impact education, perhaps channeling that energy and time and resource to the nonprofit itself would give us a better ROI for now. So that was sort of the decision.
Okay. All right. What advice would you give to young people who aspire to make a difference, but they don't know where to start?
I was like, well, I would say be inspired by everything around you. Sometimes, I mean, people always ask me this question, like, who do you admire? And I'm always like, I don't necessarily admire or have like an idol in a specific one person, but I admire so many little things in people all around me. And it's meeting someone who's got an infectious laugh. And I'm like, God, I want one of those laughs. Like, I can see the joy they bring or how they bring people together in a room. And I'm like, oh, I like that. I want a bit of that. Or someone who just handles difficult situations really well, or someone who's just generous with their time. There's always something to learn from those around you. So be inspired with everything that you see and everything that you experience and go through. I would say that. Secondly, it's if you really feel that you want to do something, not realize that not everything is for everyone, right? Not everyone's meant to run a nonprofit. Not everyone's meant to like, be a politician or whatever that is. It's sometimes it's in your current space. We need actually change makers in every way, shape, and form. For me, it's actually moving away from the labels, because we've labeled things as social enterprise, and then you've got a non-profit, and it's like, oh, social enterprise, you make profit, but it's social. No, NGO, no profit. And then a regular business is maximize profit. So that's just not the way the world should function, I think. I think no matter who you are, what you do, you should kind of social good should be part of what you do. And Richard Branson says doing good is good for business. And so that's kind of the mantra I would say to have in any walk of your life. So even if you work in a company, speak to your bosses, speak to people, be like, hey, how do we incorporate real, impactful, meaningful work in our work? Build it into every aspect of your life. And then I would say, if you really do want to help a community or something like that, you have to get your hands dirty, in the sense, be on the ground, understand the people that you're working with. Don't help from afar, think you know the answers or you think you know best. And we sit at home and we type out this like amazing plan and we're like, yeah, I've got it figured out. And that's not how it works. It's so important to talk to people, meet as many people as you can, experience as much as you can, and ideas come and solutions come along the way. And it's like, for me, I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what it was. And in fact, I said, I don't really want to work with children. I remember saying that coming out of uni, but lo and behold, I ended up putting myself out there. I reached out to people. I did things that, it's not exactly the most fun thing, but I was young. I had the time to give to things. And through experience, you kind of, life leads you to a certain place.
Can you share some personal practices or habits that you have that help you to stay focused and energized?
Well, I mean, I think anyone would be, I'd be lying if I said, like, I'm always so energized and focused. And I think we all have bad days. If I look at things that I've consistently been a part of my life, I would say I've always been active. I've always moved around. Like, so even coming out of school, I was very athletic. And then into my early days when I was in modeling and in the pageant world, very active. So that is, I think that exercise and that movement is, well, number one, it's discipline. So you do something consistently. Number two, it's just really good for your body, and it gives you like your good hormones, and it helps you deal with stress. It helps you deal with a lot of like the hard stuff that you go through, and you just do it. And because you do it all the time, it builds really good habits and patterns. So that's something that I've really always kept consistent.
Yeah.
I would say, courage. Like I use these things, I have these 4 C's, right? So consistency, which I talked about, courage. So being courageous, which is essentially the tattoo in my arm. And I got this during COVID, and it talks about courage, which is to...
Maybe you can show the tattoo to the camera. This camera.
This. It's an infinity, and it's got like the word core, which is the Latin root word for courage, and which means to tell your story from the heart. And very often we associate courage with being very strong and bold and like aggressive. And courage is actually found in our vulnerability and sometimes being soft and being weak and being vulnerable to kind of to put yourself in difficult situations, to try new things. So that's always been, I guess, how I've lived life. I've always done things that scare me a little. I've always put myself out there a little. But also being true to yourself, right? And then the third C is consciousness. Being conscious about, I think, everything around us, that appreciation for life, appreciation for the little things, the big things. I think especially for a lot of entrepreneurs and young people that are so driven, you get so caught up on the big picture and the big stuff that you have to achieve. You don't stop to actually, we say stop and smell the roses, but it's actually the smallest, littlest things around us that if you can form an appreciation for that in the long run, it actually helps you build a much happier life. And then compassion. I guess the work that I do is a huge part of it is built on compassion. So being compassionate to yourself, first and foremost, but also then to people and situations around you. I think life is so crazy and hectic that we lack empathy, and we're like, oh my God, that person, rah. And then you realize, oh, actually it was this. So we catch ourselves doing that a lot, and trying to just be a lot more compassionate to people around us.
I love that. So the 4 C's are consistency,
courage, compassion, and consciousness.
I love consciousness. That's my favorite one. It's a lot about just being grateful and practicing gratitude. Something I picked up not that long ago was just a gratitude journal.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as writing down. It takes 5 minutes. You wake up, you write down 3 things that you're grateful for. And it can be anything. It can be my warm shower.
I know.
Coffee. And then you write down one thing that would make today great. And the key here is that it has to be something that's within your control. So you can't say something like, oh, if it doesn't rain, it's going to be a great day. That's not in your control.
Yes.
But something like, I'm going to be kind to my colleagues today. That's within your control. So, and it just changes your mindset.
Absolutely.
Some people think gratitude only applies to really big things in life, but we have so much that other people wish they could have, including just being able to sit here and have this conversation. So small things like that, just bringing your consciousness here to the present, to see it from a different point of view, I think has a huge impact in your just overall happiness even.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's if you can find the appreciation, the genuine appreciation in the small things in your life, like you'll transform as a person. And I think it will. Everyone's like, we talk about, if you go on like socials, you're seeing all these comments on like mental health and how to be happy, and or people not being happy, and it's such a big thing today. It's like people want to know, how do I be happy, right? And so that's such a crux of it. And that was actually at the start of COVID. I realized I was so caught up in the big things, especially in my life. It was preparing for a pageant, preparing for modeling, and then a lot of especially in the modeling world, you don't get any power. Like, people look at it and think it's glamorous, but you have no power in the jobs. You don't get to choose the job you want to do. I mean, they essentially choose you. I mean, maybe unless you're like, I don't know, Naomi Campbell. And even then, but it's someone still has to see value in having you in their campaign, on their runway. And so I lost so much of my power in the first, I started modeling at 15. So 15 into my 20s. Even in the beauty pageant, I'm standing on the stage with a Malaysian sash on me and like, please pick me, please pick me. And it's like, who's the prettiest girl on stage? Like, who deserves to win this crown? It's like, what is this? But you put yourself into that, and I lost all my power, and I hated that. I hated the feeling that, my God, I mean, life already, you have so little control as it is. And now even in my own personal life, I have no control. And I think I mentally manipulated myself so I wouldn't let that make me feel bad, but it did. And so it was only my late 20s and my 30s where I really had to find ways to take back that power and start having that ability to make choices for my own life, what I want to do. And then to not get so caught up on all the big stuff that you have very little control over, which then was the gratitude. And so no matter what happened to me, I was like, oh, okay. Even if great big things happened, I was like, oh, okay, next. What's next? Like, can you imagine? How do you like life? Life's just going to be really sad. Nothing's going to feel good enough. Yeah. So that was my journey. So.
How can our listeners get involved or support your initiatives, both at Fugee School or what you have next for Fuji La or anything?
Yeah. So where we stand today is we do the work we do. We run a school, we run a scholarship program, youth programs. We support refugee children and youth access, and we want them to become successful people and be able to live dignified lives. No one wants to live on handouts and charity. People want to be able to contribute to the societies they live in, and that's super important for all of us to remember. We need to stop seeing people like they're here to just take and live off us. That's the first very important thing. Where we're at right now is we're really trying to encourage and to have conversations with the right parties, which is basically corporate sector, also government, policymakers, advocates, to say things have to change. If people want to help, yes, you can help in making a donation. I could give you a long list of ways to help, and I will, but we really need to change policy, because there is no solution that's going to really be able to solve this otherwise. And so considering, let refugees work. We need the workforce. We bring in millions of people from other countries to work at jobs that we can't work at or don't want to work at. Let the community that are already here, that have a wide variety of skills, let them do the work. That's something we're advocating for, and also let children and youth access education. And we need to shift away from a more encouraging, supporting environment for the refugee community here.
As individuals, without having the power to actually change policies, what can we do?
Hashtag your ministers. Like, nudging is always important. Because I think that's the thing where, so I'll get to the point of how they can help, but that's the point here, right? Because we keep saying we don't have the power, and therefore we can only make a donation. And then at the same time, everyone says, oh, the Rakyat don't want this, the Rakyat don't want this. So then we're like, wait, do we not want this? Did I say I didn't want this? So there's sort of like this going on. And then the loudest voices in the room end up being the ones that are very othering or very anti. And so we need to make our voices heard, which is why we need to amplify messages on our socials. We need to encourage inclusion. We need to say, hey, we're Malaysians. We have enough, and we want to share with others, and not do it in a haphazard way. We want to do it in a comprehensive, proper way, right? So we're all smart people. We have the resources. Let's put our brains together and figure it out. That's what needs to happen. The only thing lacking right now is the will. But for those of you who do want to help in a slightly more individual way, I think go to our website, fuji.org. We have amazing, you can gift a friend for their birthday. You can sponsor an education monthly. You can buy kids school trips. So there's a really cool menu of options to choose from. And we're running a campaign. I don't know when this is airing, but we're also running World Refugee Days this month, June. So we're running campaigns to support, to kind of amplify that message. And so it's always great. I always say it's great to kickstart a conversation. Once you talk to someone about a topic that they may never have heard of or they don't know much about, you plant a seed in someone's head and they start thinking about things a little differently. And that's a great beginning for change to come.
Great. So what's next for you personally and professionally? Any new projects or goals on the horizon?
So I am launching my own podcast. It's called Deb on Air, and it is launching in July.
What's the focus of your podcast?
So I guess for me, I've been in entertainment for so many years. I've been a TV host. I've hosted travel shows. I moderate, MC. I've done a lot of this, and I continue to do it. And I felt like I wanted to create, I guess, having a little bit of having your own, what do you call it, creative license, if you will, to be able to create something that is very much my own, that is not limited by whether it's media or whoever that runs and directs it. So it's a podcast. I think the first season has an undertone of financial freedom. So we really want to understand not the technical side of money, but we really want to understand people's relationship and behavior patterns with money. Why do you manage the money the way you do? How did your parents speak to you about money growing up? And how does money, what is the role of money and finance in your life today? So things like that. We speak to quite a range of interesting Malaysians. And then of course I think also the podcast for me it's on leadership, it's on entrepreneurship and a degree of empowerment.
Great. I think our listeners would love to also discover your podcast because, I think it would be very beneficial for them to, open their eyes to different ways of looking at money and your relationship with money. Yeah.
And I also think there's so many cool Malaysians doing amazing things, I discover Malaysians, I'm like, what, that guy did that or that girl did this, and you didn't know. So not just Malaysians here, but also all over the world doing amazing things. So really celebrating our own talent is so important.
All right, we're coming towards the end of our episode today. So usually what we get into last is about our work culture here at Hiredly. So Hiredly is a company that takes work culture very, very seriously. We have 7 core values that we repeat constantly. We put them
All over.
Yeah, they're not in this room, but they're outside on the walls. They're on everyone's desk. Everyone has their own little postcard sort of thing.
So if I tested anyone, they'd all know
Well,
them by heart.
That's the hope. That's actually our hope.
Tell me 2 now.
Yeah. Yeah, and Danny.
Well done.
80-20.
Oh dear.
Nicole.
Communicate with radical campus.
Ha.
See, it's working.
Yeah. So yeah, we do. We and what we do differently from other companies is that our core values actually drive a lot of decision making. So
Amazing.
there are some companies that have, communication, passion,
But what does it mean?
integrity,
Yeah.
and then
Exactly.
they don't think about it, and maybe they refer to it like once a year as
Yeah.
a refresher. People get pumped for about a week and then they forget all about it. But here it's actually it's so built into the culture. It's even in conversations. So when
amazing.
people are having discussions, you'll hear someone say, hey, we got to move fast. That's one of our values. Or like, that's not so 80-20. That's another one of our values. So we do take it very seriously. And every episode we focus on one. So for today, we're focusing on be humble, appreciative, and united. Be
Oh, perfect. That's exactly our conversation today.
So in a nutshell, be humble, appreciative, and united is the value that reminds our team that ego is the enemy of learning and teamwork. And it encourages us to always choose to practice humility to grow and build a collaborative team. And then to express that gratitude, because people often feel very underappreciated. A lot of people do feel that they're doing so much and they don't hear thank you enough. So we want people to know that we don't take them for granted here. So can you share an experience where practicing humility and appreciation has helped you overcome a significant challenge in your work or any of your other initiatives?
Oop. I'd like to think about that. So from a personal story again, I've never worked for anyone in my life, I guess, like in a corporate sense. And so to a large degree, I've always been my own boss, if you will. I decide to get out of bed in the morning. I decide what jobs to do, who to work with, what I get paid. I have to negotiate. So a lot of my skills I had to learn on the fly. No one really taught them to me. I observed, and I guess my advantage was I met a lot of very different people from all walks of life, right? So bosses, owners, so I could learn from a lot of different people. And at the same time, I started Fuji in 2008, and I was in my early 20s. And so over the past, maybe more recently, the past 7 years, I've gotten more involved in the running of the organization and the leadership of it. And so it's been my big journey, quite a steep learning curve for me to figure out, well, I can say I'm a leader, I can say I'm the founder, but what does that mean if my team don't respect me, if I make decisions but I don't support them in achieving them and all that, right? How is this going to work? And if I was being really honest with myself, I didn't have certain skills to lead either. So for me, at the same time, while growing the organization, hiring people, taking on more projects, managing more funds, trying to maximize impact ultimately for us, I've also had to really learn at the same time, right? And so that's, one hand, I can be out in the other side of my life and be very glamorous and appreciated and, a degree of fame and whatever, popularity and glam. But in the other side of my life, I've got to roll my sleeves up. I've got to do the work. I've got to really be humble about it and leave all your ego at the door and be very teachable. And that's, I think, if you want to really earn the respect of like your peers. So I think that's my journey. Yeah. And I think in the space of the nonprofit, you're working with communities and people and your team. So everyone, it's a very, how do I say this? It's like ego and, oh, you're my boss and all this hierarchy. It doesn't work in that same way. It's really much based on a core set of values as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for sharing so much of your story. I think our listeners are really going to be inspired by your journey, and those who are thinking about how they can make a difference might then feel moved to finally make that step to make a difference. So thank you so much.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.